Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Smart Talks by the Elizabeth Smart Foundation. I am Elizabeth, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, Neo Strong, and I'm actually going to pass it to her today to introduce our guest.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today, we are pleased to welcome Nicole Tanner. She is a mama I think that everyone can relate to and has a very interesting perspective on internet dating safety and taking the shame out of discussing what we as parents face with our, very complicated teens and tweens. So, Nicole, thank you so much for joining us. Do you mind starting by just sharing your most recent experience with your daughter, and then we can kind of go from there?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I've got 6 kids. My daughter Morgan is going to be 18 in September, so a couple months. And just to kind of give a little bit of context to the story, so probably about 12, 13 years old, I found her cell phone. Well, she had a cell phone, and we finally started going through it, but I hadn't really thought much about it because my older boys were just never really into social media. It just wasn't, they just didn't care about Snapchat and all that. So I never really worried about it. But I got on my daughter's phone and she had a lot of sexting messages from like older men. And, she started out about 12, 13. And they start out with like, you're cute and stuff on like Musically, an app. It's kind of like TikTok. And they groom you and kind of switch you over to like Snapchat, where the conversations can just disappear and stuff. So we started going through our phones, and it was just shocking what these people say to your children. It's just insane. And one of them was in college in another state, and I specifically was still pretending to be Morgan. And I said, I'm 13, right? He goes, yeah, I don't care. They just genuinely don't care. But so that's the context. We had some history with the kind of this online scary world. So fast forward to this last March, her and I just weren't seeing eye to eye, and we just were having very hard parenting issues. So I'd asked her to move to her dad's house with her dad and stepmom in March. So probably the beginning of June, I got a call from my ex-husband, and said that Morgan's been missing. She talked to her last night at 5:30. She was supposed to come straight home. We haven't heard from her. I have filed a missing persons report. And at first I didn't go too crazy. I didn't think much about it because I'm like, hey, she's almost 18. She does tend to have some impulse issues. Okay, maybe she's acting out. She's trying to prove a point. She's a teenager. She probably fell asleep at a friend's house. Probably at 3, 4 in the morning, she'll get up in the afternoon. So by the time like 4 or 5 in the afternoon hits, no word. And it just goes straight to voicemail. Her call is just going straight to voicemail. So that night, nothing. The next morning, still no word. Her best friend hasn't heard from her. The cops have sent the officers out to her best friend's house just to make sure she wasn't saying she wasn't there, but she was there, one of those types. And so my ex-husband and his wife started pulling her call logs and texting logs. And her texting log showed that she was speaking to several individuals from California, New York, Alabama, just various states across. And I'm thinking the worst now, right? Like I'm thinking the history that she's had and kind of just how quickly they groom you. And so my heart starts panicking. Like that's when things got real. And at that point, we had learned that she had taken off with a guy that she'd met on Tinder, and no one knew who this person was. It was just some man off of Tinder. And they didn't even know what vehicle she'd gotten into. Her dad thought she got into a white car, and her sister thought she'd gotten into like a blue car. And so by day 3, like now I'm in panic mode. Like literally no one has heard from her. In the end, it turned out really well that I did a big social media blast to have people kind of help me find my daughter, and the detectives got some good leads and she was found. But it really brought light and awareness to something that I don't think we really talk about a lot. And I think it's really common now to meet people online, whether it's Tinder, Instagram, like just all these things. These teenagers are using them, even adults, and really scary things can happen. And as soon as I started talking about my story and how lucky I am that mine turned out well, and this guy ended up being, only 19, and not very much, not a ton older, but there's so many stories out there that it doesn't end the way mine ended. I think a week after I shared my story, there was a story of a guy, I don't know if you guys saw this up in Cache County. He's 21, good looking guy. He's being charged, and they met him off Tinder. He's being charged with rape, and they believe there's other victims out there. And so I really think it's something to talk about, whether it's the sexting world and what we feel as parents and how we have to navigate that world and try and stay ahead of our teenagers and what they're doing, which is really hard because it's a fine balance of, I want to treat you with respect and have privacy and all those things that we want them to learn. But at the same time, are they using it properly? And if not, it's not necessarily their fault, right? Because they're only 12, 13. They're just trying to figure out life and who they are. And so, yeah, I just felt like that was just a huge topic we've got to start talking about is the sexting. And I didn't share my story for a long time, but when she was in 12, 13, that one was really hard for me. I had shared some of the messages with you, Maya, and you saw the words. And I didn't talk about it because I was so afraid, the shame. I was worried that parents would think, what goes on in that house? How could I send my kids to their home to play with the other kids? It's just, yeah, it's embarrassing, but it shouldn't be, right? Like, why should I be embarrassed?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
When you arm your cell phone, I mean, they have access to the entire world and vice versa. The world has entire access to you. I mean, just the other day, my little girl who's 5, she came up, I want a phone. When do I get a phone? And I was like, never. I am never giving you a phone. And she's like, oh, why not? And I was like, in a very long time, I'll give you one. But I mean, they're such powerful tools. And like initially, I mean, like, I don't think my parents ever, they saw having a cell phone as a good thing, as a very safe thing. I didn't get one until after I was kidnapped, after I was rescued. And, you know, it was a tool. It was a safety tool. So they could communicate with me so that I could communicate with them. I mean, it was, you know, back when we all just had a brick that stayed charged at 100% for like a week. You know, not like, it's only 12 o'clock and my battery's down to 10%. Where's an outlet? So, I mean, it was definitely like the old phone, but you know, it never crossed my parents' mind. It never crossed my mind that a phone could be potentially dangerous. Now, I mean, of course, they've evolved drastically. I mean, I'm almost to the point where if I can't do it on my phone, don't ask me to do it. And that's actually scary. I mean, just getting this podcast up and going, I had to get reacquainted with my laptop. I was like, wait, how does this work again? What am I supposed to do again?
Yeah.
And it's scary how powerful they are and just how much access really is available to the world. I'm just so curious. You know, you're a mother of 6 kids. Like, I have 3 kids and I feel like my responsibility currently is maxed out. I cannot imagine having 6. Like, what do you talk about with your other children? I mean, what are the conversations that you've had with them since?
It's been really hard. I have a 10-year-old daughter who does have a cell phone because she dances about 20 something hours a week. So she's gone a lot. And so I feel like I need to be able to communicate with her. You know, we've had to have some really honest conversations. I haven't shied away from what's really out there. And I've had to explain, you know, with her older sister, she kind of got mixed into the wrong crowd, and you know, she got mixed into people talking to her that she didn't know, because at first it was just like, oh, that's a cute video, oh hi, how are you, da 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 da. And I've had to explain to her, we can't talk to people we don't know. If you physically don't know them from school, and if I don't physically know them from school and can't verify them, we don't talk to them. It can only be dance friends, dance members. And I go through her phone periodically, just if she'll just be sitting next to me and say, okay, let's see your phone, let's go through it. So there's not this chance to kind of hide things, but I'm also very open and honest with her now. I used to shy away from the conversations of, you know, sex and boyfriends and kissing and words and stuff. Now I'm just so open about it. And I didn't realize what a good tool that was, because as I was talking with this detective that worked on my daughter's case, I had him answer a lot of questions for me, because I just had so many people asking, like, how do we talk to our kids? How do we talk to tweens? And he just said, number one thing he consistently said across the board is honest and open conversations. You want them to have a real perspective of reality and not live in a bubble of this can't happen to you.
it goes contrary to my instinct. Like my instinct is microchip them, put them in a bubble, create this safe haven for them, when that's not reality. And I have a 10-year-old as well who has a phone. But it has been taken away for the rest of the summer because of behaviors. She has Marco Polo, which is a video messaging app. And I mainly wanted her to have it because that's how I like to communicate with them. I like to see their face and show them, what I'm doing, or want to know what they're doing, or I want to see them. Yeah. And I think also it's hard, like you had mentioned in a previous conversation, you were divorced. And so your kids are at two different households, and you want to have access to those children when you don't physically have them staying at your house. And it's been really hard for me to stick to this no cell phone until August 1st for,
it's hard because they just want to talk to you. Sometimes they just want to call you up and be like, hi mom, I miss you. And Kylie will tell me all the time, it's when she's at the dance studio, I love you, miss you. And you want those, right? Like that's kind of what Elizabeth was saying. Like it's your parents saw it as a positive tool. Like we want to use it in a positive way. Unfortunately, people don't.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because of not educating our children on what's really out there and what's appropriate language, even from someone you may know.
Oh yeah. Sexting is a very specific conversation I've had recently with my 13-year-old. She had a boy send her a picture, a bathroom selfie in his underwear. Oh, and when I immediately was like, oh no, you did not. Like I'm texting him, I'm calling his parents, I'm taking these steps, but I also didn't want to shame him. But so I invited him over. I was like, have him come over for dinner. Like he needs
and you did all the right things, I think.
Well,
that's exactly what
I don't know.
No, you did. That's exactly what the detective said.
His response was interesting. He's like, but it was his response to her, not to me. But his response was, well, it's the same as me wearing a swimsuit. So if I send you a picture of my swimsuit, is she going to be mad? And I was like, oh, nice try for the manipulation and the justification. Yeah. Like, you're not going to pull that on me. So we've talked about sexting specifically because a lot of the kids, I feel like, don't understand. They just have no perspective, right? They're just, and it's.
Well, I think they're in love.
College, my whole world was just whatever was right in front of me. And we as parents, unfortunately, all three of us have gone through sexual violence of some sort. And so we have a very realistic view on what is facing our children these days. And I mean, constantly my kids are like, but mom, not everybody is a pedophile. And I was like, cool, you're right. But it just takes one pedophile to like create
your entire life
trauma in your life. And I never, ever, ever want anybody, my kids especially, to go through that.
No, it changes one thing. And here's the thing too, is it's really hard with the teenagers, with the kids that are in their class or they go to the same high school or junior high, because there's this real emphasis and stigma on being popular.
Yeah.
And they really definitely think that if they let this boy talk to him a certain way, or if they send pictures a certain way, and they're not thinking long-term, right? They're not thinking this picture, this video that they're going to send to the boy that they love, and he says he loves her back, is going to go viral, or it's going to get spread around the junior high. And it happens more often than not that this happens. But the boys are being dumb and young too. They're not educated on how to treat a woman, that this behavior is not okay. And we've got to do a really good job as parents to start talking about sex to our children and what sex means in all forms. And how do we respect that to a person that you say you're in love with at 15, 16, 17, because there's so much pressure to be in relationships. And there's so much pressure to have a boyfriend and girlfriend. And yeah, it's just trying to fit in. They all want to fit in.
And one of those things that is, I think, also really important that Mio and I, we've talked about on past podcasts, is that it's not just consent that you need, but it's enthusiastic consent. We had someone else on here that we had this great podcast with, and she talked about how, she was raped by her boyfriend, but she didn't know it was rape because she eventually gave in, because it was him just being like, but come on, I love you, I want to be with you, this is an expression of our love. And he just kept like whittling her away, whittling her away, whittling her away until she finally gave in. And then she felt terrible, and she felt filthy, and she felt dirty, and she felt like she wasn't as good as everyone else. And she thought it was like totally her fault. And, you know, it wasn't until once again, years later, that someone explained it to her that no, it's not just consent. It has to be enthusiastic consent. It's not just, okay, well, fine, like I give in, like let's have sex. It has to be like, yes, I want to have sex with you right now, or that sort of trend.
No, it's so true, because if we don't start talking about it, you know, the detective gave me some sad statistics that 1 in 5 women will be a victim of sexual assault. 1 in 5. That's
It's 1 in
crazy.
3 in Utah.
It's even higher in Utah.
Which is even crazier, right? And then 13% will experience sexual coercion in their life. Like, that's just such a high number to me, because, you know, not to put, like, I like to put it in perspective, like, we're freaking about the COVID percentages here in Utah, right? Like, as they creeping up in 4%, 5%, 6%, and we're freaking out about that. 13% of our girls are going to have that experience. That's just too much.
That's just being the worst. That's not even including just, I don't want to say regular old sexual trauma or abuse, but sexual trauma, sexual abuse, rape. I mean, that's not even including those numbers. Those numbers are way higher. And that's the terrifying thing. I mean, I think it's good to be safe. I think it's good to like take precautions, like with the COVID, with all things. I think it's just generally good practices to be safe.
Yeah.
But then there also comes this point in me where I feel like I'm just like, how is this still happening? How do we have such high numbers when it comes to sexual abuse and sexual violence and rape? And yet, I mean, there are a lot. I don't want to disservice anyone, because there are so many good men and women who dedicate their lives to this topic. But I mean, there's still just such a massive number of people who have no idea, who like don't care. And the numbers that we know, the statistics that we know are so much higher that yes, you should know and you should care, because it affects every single one of us, whether it's you directly or through someone you love. It affects every single one of us.
That's so funny that you say that, because I started posting about this a lot more consistently on my Instagram, and you would be surprised at how many followers I lose. Not that I care, because it's not a popular contest, but I'm shocked that, like, even as a society, we don't want to talk about it. It's just, I know it's a hard topic, and I know it's not a fun and cute topic that brings everyone smiles and laughter. But it's a real topic that we have to have, especially here in Utah, because of the dominant LDS faith that we have here, where the children are taught that, you know, you're dirty or you're wrong, or that's really bad behavior, that's really bad to engage in, and all these things that they just have misconceptions of. And they're curious, right? But we've got to talk to them about it. And I think a lot of parents think, that's not my kid because he takes sacrament, or that's not my daughter because she takes sacrament. She would never allow herself to be in a position like that, or, oh, it would never happen to my family. But it's happening.
Yeah.
And
I mean, nobody ever thought that. I mean, I don't think the possibility of me being kidnapped was ever on anyone's radar in my family, in my neighborhood even. You know, I grew up in a nice, you know, upper middle class neighborhood, and I just don't think anyone ever thought that that could be a possibility, that some girl from that neighborhood could be kidnapped. And it did. So thinking that that won't happen, whatever it is, you know, whether it's sexting or, you know, sex or whatever, it doesn't even have to be sex. I mean, it's anything, but it can happen, and it does happen. And that's why it is just, I mean, echoing exactly what you said and what the detective told you. The most important thing that we can do is having those honest and open conversations with your children. And that's daunting. I mean, it's daunting for me. You know, my oldest is 5, my youngest is 1. Part of me is like, it's daunting and it's terrifying for me. I mean, I just sit there and I look at my children and think, well, they're too small to talk about that now. They're too small. Like, I should just wait till they're older. But then part of me is also like, hang on, I should probably be practicing what I'm preaching. And yes, it may not be appropriate to talk to like my 5 and 3-year-old right now sex is, but I can certainly talk to them about their bodies and how nobody
Yeah.
has the right to touch them, and how they shouldn't be scared. And if they are, that they need to tell me, and that it's never their fault, and that I'll love them no matter what. I mean, those are the kinds of things I can talk to my children about right now.
Yeah.
No,
And I
and
think
that's so
as
true.
far as what I want to do, I've talked to my oldest about sexting and grooming, but I haven't specifically mentioned coercion. And that'll be on the list for my next lovely heart to heart that she just rolls her eyes at, but she sits and she's listening, which is
Well,
the most important thing. And as Elizabeth reiterated, just that unconditional love, no matter what they do, no matter what they say, no matter what happens to them, you love them no matter what. Because I think so much I can see the behavior online on social media, Instagram and TikTok, with my own daughter and her friends. Like it's alarming to me how many comments are driven to their physicality, right? It's, you're a babe, you're beautiful, you're this, how are you so, and I'm like, how about how smart you are, how funny you are, how kind you are? Like, just trying to instill those basic values is proving to be way harder than I thought.
it's so hard.
Yeah, and I have to keep reminding myself, like, I'm in my 40s, I've had massive life experience, and I still struggle with self-esteem and self-worth. And so I also can't just automatically expect my kids in the middle of puberty to understand it, but that is definitely a preemptive building block, I feel like, for combating these coercion type situations and the online dangers, and the, just making sure they understand that they don't deserve that.
And here's even the harder part too, is, I started sharing my story, and I had this girl reach out to me on Instagram, and I kind of vaguely shared that, but she kept silent for about 4 years now about her coach started grooming her at 14, 15 in person, and then took it to like Instagram and Snapchat, and he would sext her daily. Like, he had kids. It started out with babysitting his kids and the family's kids, and then he started grooming her, and it became something that for an entire year that she couldn't stop. But she just said, you know what, I've never spoken about it because I felt so alone, and I had so much shame. And I think that's my number one thing, and why I want to shout it from the rooftop. I never want someone else to feel alone. I know you know what that feels like. I have felt alone when my stuff happened to me when I was a kid, but I just never want anyone to feel that shame or feel alone again. Like, that broke my heart to hear that she's been carrying this for 4 years and has never told anyone. Oh
yeah. And we're actually, part of smart defense is learning how to listen. Like, we have a whole lesson on how to be an enthusiastic listener, an enthusiastic supporter to the rest of humanity, right? Like, we believe you, we support you, we're here to listen to you, it's judgment free, and chances are I can relate to you, and I'm a safe and a brave place for you to, release the shame and the guilt and start taking steps towards healing, because it'll eat you alive.
It will. And
find, the most unhealthy coping mechanisms. And it was Nancy, Elizabeth, remember we had her on the podcast, and she said, one of the biggest things you can do is love them at their most unlovable, because typically after trauma, you're not who you are in your core, right? And you have behaviors that make you feel like maybe you're unlovable, even though you're really not. And as friends and supporters and family members, we need to love them even though they feel unlovable.
Well, and we really got to get the message out there of exactly what you said, judgment free. Just even as parenting, like, I feel like as parents, we tend to only talk about the good things our kids do, right? Like, oh, my kid just got just aced that test, or my kid just got their license, how amazing. And so, but we don't talk about the things that we struggle with as parents. And I think we hold that a lot in, and shame. But if one more person would speak up, like, you know what, I'm struggling with my 15-year-old because they're just not the person I remember them being at 12. Like, has anyone experienced this? Like, any thoughts, any ideas? But we don't say that because we're so worried that people are going to walk around going, man, those parents just don't know what the heck they're doing, do they? I wouldn't want my kids hanging out with that house.
I mean, really? Kids don't come with like a direction manual and information manual. I mean, I wish they did, because there are sometimes like my 3-year-old boy, oh my goodness, I'm about to die. Like last week, he jumped off the bed upstairs after I told him repeatedly to stop jumping on the bed. He split open like right above his eyebrow. We had to take him to the hospital, to the ER, because it was Sunday night, of course, and like get it stitched up. And then we just went down to Zion National Park last weekend, and I mean, it was amazing, like so incredible. But what do you think happened? He's jumping on the sofa. I tell him, stop jumping on the sofa. What do you think happens? I turn my back and walk out of the room. Next thing I know, he comes running into the room, blood streaming down his face, split the stitches. I mean, the stitches have been taken out, but split the exact same spot on his forehead again. I mean, I'm just like, part of me is just like, where is like the reset button, or like the pause button, or the go to sleep button?
Seriously. Well, and here's the thing, every kid's so different, right? What works for this kid to parent and punish or do restrictions and grounding doesn't necessarily work for the other kid. You could ground one kid and they're going to cry and write you this 20-page, I'm so sorry letter, I broke your heart. And you got the other kid going, ground me, cool, now what? Like, you said, you can't ground the other kid.
That's how my youngest is. She just challenges me. That's why it's August 1st on her cell phone, because I was like, July 1st. July 10th, July 24th. Oh shit, it's August 1st. Like, it's just.
It's so true.
Even
no, you do.
Like, I remember, like, my parents went out of town. My brother and I, we were older. My older brother, he was 18 at the time, and maybe he was even 19, and maybe I was 17. No, hang on. I might have been even older, because my brother, who's after me, was 16, and my mom was like, don't take my car. And like, my older brother and I, we would never touch her car if she said don't take it. And my younger brother, just after me, he like picked up the keys, like walked up to her car, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, are you crazy? You're gonna take her car? And he's like, what? He's not gonna stop loving me. And I was like, oh my gosh. I would have never have thought that. That would have never crossed through my mind as one of the consequences.
No, never. But yeah, I just think we've got to just start being kinder to parents. You know, we just got to be kinder, and we're all got to realize we're all struggling. Maybe it's not on a daily basis. Maybe some struggle a lot harder than others, depending on what's going on in the home or what the child's faced with. We just don't know, right? It could be any level of struggles that the child has, dyslexia, all the way up to a mental illness. It doesn't matter, right? We just don't know. And we're so concerned with our perfect family and our perfect lives and our perfect everything. And I was so scared to start saying, yeah, this is really happening to my life, my family. Like, you wouldn't think about it. I have a freaking house on the hill. I'm a stay-at-home mom, like the white picket fence fairy tale ending right now. And yet I'm struggling as a mom sometimes. I can't do it all. And I cry sometimes in the shower, and I'm thinking, why am I crying in the shower? Why am I so afraid to reach out and tell someone that I am struggling today?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Well, Nicole, I have absolutely loved having you on today. And I think you just brought up some really important information and things that people absolutely do need to hear. And for everyone watching, I mean, if you're a parent, you know that this is the hardest job in the world, and it never ends. In my brief 5 years of parenting, it never ends. In my parents' experience of parenting, it never ends. I think it's so important to listen to our fellow parents, to support each other, because we all struggle. And, you know, like Nicole and like Mio have said, it's not easy. Each child is different, and what works for one does not work for the other. And so let's come together. Let's start these open and honest conversations with our kids. Like, let's talk to them about what is out there and make sure we're doing it in a safe place and reinforcing to them that we love them no matter what. We are their parents, and that means we are their first line of defense. I always used to think that I couldn't wait till I became the parent because that meant I was the boss. But actually, nothing could be less true. I have 3 very small bosses that my every action and thought of every single day. And
So true.
you know what? I'm okay with them knowing that, because I want them to always think of me as their first line of defense. And as far as we go in interacting with each other, let's show a little bit more kindness and a little bit more compassion and a little bit more understanding and support. And so with that being said, I want to say thank you again so much for tuning in. Thank you, Nicole, for being on today. You've been an amazing guest. I can't wait to have this aired in the very near future. So thank you, everyone. Make sure you tune in next time to our next podcast. Remember, we are on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on Facebook. Make sure you subscribe to us, you follow us, and thank you once again, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, you guys.